Let me ask you something. What did you eat this morning? If you're like most people over 55, you probably reached for something you've been eating for decades, something that feels familiar, comforting, even healthy. And here's what surprises a lot of people when I bring this up in conversation. That familiar morning routine might be quietly working against your heart, your blood sugar, and your energy in ways you'd never expect. Not because you made an obviously bad choice, but because breakfast affects the body very differently as we age, and most of us were never told that. What I want to share with you today isn't meant to make you feel like you've been doing everything wrong. That's not what this is about. It's about understanding one pattern that millions of older adults repeat every single morning without realizing its effect, and then giving you something genuinely useful to take away from our time together. Welcome to Senior Health and Healthy Aging. I'm so glad you're here. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I'd encourage you to do that now. We put out practical, evidence-based health information specifically designed for adults who want to stay strong, stay independent, and enjoy the years ahead. One click keeps that information coming to you. Now let's get into this. To understand the breakfast mistake, we first need to talk about what happens inside the body every single morning before you ever take a bite. During the night, while you're sleeping, your body burns through most of the quick energy reserves stored in your liver. By the time you wake up, your blood sugar is naturally at its lowest point of the day. Your brain and your heart are ready for fuel. Your cells are primed to absorb whatever you send them. And here's the critical piece. As we grow older, the way our bodies handle blood sugar changes significantly. When you were in your 20s or 30s, your pancreas could release insulin quickly and efficiently to move sugar out of the bloodstream and into your cells. That process kept your energy steady throughout the morning. After 55 or 60, that response often becomes slower and less precise. The technical term for this is reduced insulin sensitivity, which simply means your cells don't respond to insulin quite as quickly as they once did. That's a completely normal part of aging, but it means that what you eat first thing in the morning has a bigger impact on your blood sugar, your energy, your heart, and even your brain than it did 20 years ago. And that's exactly where the mistake comes in. Meet Dorothy Walsh. She's 68 years old and spent 30 years teaching high school English in Boise, Idaho. She retired 2 years ago and genuinely loves her mornings now. She wakes up early, makes a cup of coffee, and sits at her kitchen table with a bowl of instant oatmeal and a glass of orange juice. Then she'll sometimes add a piece of toast because she says she doesn't feel full without it. Dorothy has high blood pressure and was told about a year ago that her blood sugar is in the pre-diabetes range. She's not on any medications for blood sugar yet, but her doctor told her to watch what she eats. Dorothy heard that oatmeal is heart healthy and orange juice has vitamin C, so she figured her breakfast was a pretty solid choice. She was genuinely surprised to hear that her morning routine might be contributing to the very problem her doctor was warning her about. Here's why. Instant oatmeal, orange juice, and white toast all share one important characteristic. They are digested quickly and send glucose, which is just the sugar your body uses for fuel, rushing into your bloodstream in a short period of time. On its own, a small spike in blood sugar after eating is completely normal, but when you combine multiple fast-digesting carbohydrates in one meal, especially without much protein, fat, or fiber to slow things down, that blood sugar spike becomes larger and lasts longer. For someone with pre-diabetes or reduced insulin sensitivity, those repeated morning spikes over weeks, months, and years take a real toll. They put more strain on the pancreas, contribute to inflammation in the blood vessels, and gradually push blood sugar higher over time. Now here's something that often surprises people. Even foods that sound obviously healthy can cause this effect. Low-fat yogurt that's sweetened, fruit smoothies made with mostly fruit and no protein, granola from a bag, even many so-called heart-healthy cereals. They may be low in fat and high in vitamins, but if they're high in fast-digesting carbohydrates and low in protein and fiber, they can create that same blood sugar roller coaster that leaves you fatigued by mid-morning and hungry well before lunch. Now let me introduce you to Gerald Okafor. He's 62, a former civil engineer who retired early from a firm in Atlanta, Georgia. Gerald is what you might call relentlessly curious. When his doctor mentioned that breakfast habits could influence heart health, Gerald went home and read everything he could find. He came back 2 appointments later with a notebook full of questions and a completely overhauled morning routine. Gerald has elevated cholesterol and a family history of heart disease on his father's side, so he takes this seriously. His doctor appreciates his enthusiasm, even if Gerald does occasionally walk in with a 12-page printout from a medical journal. What Gerald discovered is something cardiologists have been paying attention to for years. The combination of high blood sugar spikes and elevated cholesterol doesn't just affect each of those things separately, they interact. When blood vessels are repeatedly exposed to excess glucose, it creates a type of stress on the inner lining of the arteries. Over time, this makes the arteries more susceptible to the buildup of plaque, which is the fatty, waxy substance that can narrow arteries and raise the risk of heart attack and stroke. Gerald understood pretty quickly that getting his morning eating habits right wasn't just about blood sugar, it was directly connected to his heart. So what does getting it right actually look like? The single most important shift you can make at breakfast is adding protein. Protein digests slowly. It helps steady the release of glucose into the bloodstream and keeps insulin levels more stable. It also signals to the brain that you're full and satisfied, which reduces the urge to snack on fast carbohydrates later in the morning. The American Heart Association and nutritional researchers broadly support the idea that a protein-rich breakfast is one of the most effective ways to support both cardiovascular health and blood sugar regulation in older adults. What does that look like in practice? Eggs are one of the most well-studied breakfast proteins available. 2 eggs cooked in olive oil or a small amount of butter, paired with some vegetables, provide a filling, nutrient-rich start that doesn't send blood sugar spiking. Greek yogurt, the plain unsweetened variety, is another strong option. It contains protein, some natural fat, and probiotics that support gut health. A small handful of nuts or a tablespoon of nut butter added to oatmeal or spread on whole grain toast can slow digestion significantly. Even leftover chicken or fish from the night before works beautifully as a breakfast protein if you're open to that idea. Now, some people hear this and think they need to completely overhaul everything at once. That's not what the evidence suggests. Research on habit change consistently shows that small, sustainable adjustments are far more effective than dramatic overhauls that people abandon within a few weeks. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency over time. Dorothy decided to keep her oatmeal, but switched from instant to old-fashioned rolled oats, which digest more slowly because they retain more of their fiber structure. Then she added a soft-boiled egg on the side and replaced her glass of orange juice with a whole orange. That one swap matters more than people realize. When you eat a whole orange instead of drinking its juice, you get the fiber of the fruit, which dramatically slows how quickly the natural sugar enters your bloodstream. The juice removes that fiber entirely, leaving just a concentrated hit of sugar and water. Same fruit, very different effect on blood sugar. Dorothy's doctor noticed at her last visit that her fasting blood sugar, which is the number measured first thing in the morning before eating, had come down several points over 3 months. Not a dramatic reversal, but a meaningful move in the right direction. There's another part of the breakfast picture that rarely gets discussed, and it has to do with timing. Many older adults have developed a habit of eating breakfast very late, sometimes not until 10 or 11 in the morning, or even skipping it altogether. For some people, intermittent fasting done properly under medical supervision has certain benefits. But for older adults with prediabetes, high blood pressure, or a history of heart disease, skipping breakfast or delaying it significantly can sometimes worsen blood sugar control by midday and contribute to overeating later. If you've been a breakfast skipper, that's worth discussing with your healthcare provider because it depends very much on your individual situation and any medications you may be taking. Let's check back in with Gerald. After doing his research and working with his doctor and a registered dietitian, Gerald built himself what he calls his reliable morning formula. Plain Greek yogurt with a small handful of walnuts and a few fresh berries, plus a cup of black coffee. He rotates in 2 eggs twice a week. He says it took him about 3 weeks to stop missing his old bowl of granola, and now he genuinely doesn't think twice about it. At his last cholesterol check, his numbers were moving in the right direction. His doctor was pleased. Gerald, naturally, came prepared with questions about what could make them improve even faster. Walnuts deserve a specific mention here because they're one of the most studied foods in the context of heart health for older adults. They contain a type of healthy fat called omega-3 fatty acids, which support healthy cholesterol levels and help reduce inflammation in the blood vessels. A small handful, roughly a quarter cup, added to breakfast provides these benefits without adding excessive calories. Almonds, seeds like flaxseed and chia, and avocado are in a similar category. These aren't magic foods, but as part of a consistent breakfast pattern, they contribute to a heart healthier internal environment over time. Here's something worth pausing on for a moment. Have you ever noticed that you feel genuinely hungry again just 2 hours after breakfast, even though you just ate a full bowl of cereal? That's not a willpower problem, that's biology. When blood sugar spikes quickly and then drops back down just as fast, the body interprets that drop as a signal to find more food. That mid-morning hunger and low energy that so many older adults experience isn't inevitable. It's largely a consequence of what happened at breakfast. A protein-rich, fiber-forward morning meal tends to keep energy steady for 4 to 5 hours rather than 2. Now I want to introduce our third companion in today's conversation. Her name is Maggie Ruiz. She's 57 years old, a recently retired postal supervisor from Tucson, Arizona. Maggie took early retirement after being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes about 8 months ago. She describes herself as a late convert to thinking carefully about health, and she's still figuring out what sustainable habits look like for her. She tends to be a little hard on herself when she slips up, which her doctor keeps gently discouraging. Maggie's biggest challenge is mornings. She's always been a grab-and-go person. A granola bar, a coffee drink from the drive-thru, maybe a muffin from the break room. Now that she's home in the morning, she's trying to build something better, but isn't always sure where to start. The grab-and-go breakfast culture has been particularly hard on older adults with blood sugar concerns. Granola bars, muffins, breakfast pastries, flavored coffee drinks, and fruit and grain bars are often marketed as healthy or energizing, but are frequently loaded with added sugars and refined carbohydrates. For someone managing type 2 diabetes like Maggie, these foods can cause significant blood sugar swings that make it harder to keep readings in a healthy range throughout the day. The American Diabetes Association has long emphasized that consistent carbohydrate management and prioritizing protein and fiber at every meal, including breakfast, is a cornerstone of blood sugar control. One practical approach that works well for grab-and-go personalities is breakfast preparation the night before. A batch of hard-boiled eggs keeps in the refrigerator for up to a week. A container of plain Greek yogurt with a few walnuts added takes less than 2 minutes to grab. A small bag of mixed nuts portioned out in advance requires zero morning effort. Maggie started preparing simple breakfasts the evening before, the same way she used to prepare her things for work the night before. She found that removing the morning decision-making entirely made it much easier to choose better options consistently. There's a dimension to all of this that goes beyond blood sugar and cholesterol, and it's one that many people are surprised to learn about. What you eat at breakfast also has measurable effects on your blood pressure throughout the morning. Blood pressure naturally tends to rise in the early hours of the day. There's a well-documented phenomenon called the morning surge, where blood pressure climbs in the hours after waking as the body prepares for the activity of the day. For people with already elevated blood pressure, this morning surge can be a particularly sensitive window. High-sodium breakfasts, which include many processed meats like bacon and sausage, canned soups eaten in the morning, and some packaged breakfast foods can amplify that morning rise. While occasional bacon on a Sunday isn't going to derail anyone, making high-sodium processed foods a daily morning habit adds consistent pressure on the cardiovascular system during its most vulnerable hours. Potassium is one of the minerals that helps counterbalance sodium's effect on blood pressure. The body uses potassium to help relax blood vessel walls and move excess sodium out through the kidneys. Many Americans over 55 don't get enough potassium consistently. Foods that naturally provide potassium and work beautifully at breakfast include avocado, bananas, plain yogurt, spinach, and cooked sweet potato. Adding even one of these to your morning routine regularly can contribute to healthier blood pressure trends over time, though of course anyone on potassium restricted diets due to kidney disease should discuss this with their doctor first, because for some people, too much potassium creates its own set of problems. Dorothy, who has been managing high blood pressure for several years, was already taking medication prescribed by her doctor, which she continues faithfully, but she added half an avocado to her breakfast 2 or 3 times a week. She slices it onto her oatmeal or sometimes just eats it alongside her egg. She says she was skeptical at first because avocado seemed like something for much younger people eating salads at trendy restaurants. Now she considers it one of the best additions to her morning routine. Her morning blood pressure readings have been more consistently within her target range over the past few months, which she mentioned to her doctor at her last visit. Now here's something that doesn't get nearly enough attention when it comes to breakfast and aging: muscle. Beginning around age 40 and accelerating after 60, the body naturally loses muscle mass at a rate that can become clinically significant over time. The medical term is sarcopenia, which simply means the gradual decline of muscle tissue that comes with aging. Muscle loss isn't just about physical appearance. It directly affects strength, balance, metabolism, and the ability to remain independent. And protein at breakfast plays a surprisingly powerful role in slowing this process. Research in the field of nutrition and aging, including work supported by the National Institute on Aging, suggests that distributing protein intake evenly across meals, rather than eating most of it at dinner, helps the body use protein more effectively for muscle maintenance. When you eat a high protein breakfast, you give your body the building blocks it needs early in the day, during the hours when you're most physically active. Many older adults eat very little protein at breakfast and then try to compensate with a large protein serving at dinner, but by then the body's window for muscle synthesis has largely passed for the day. Simply shifting some of that protein to the morning can make a meaningful difference over months and years. Maggie started paying attention to this after her dietitian explained it during one of their sessions. She started adding eggs to her morning routine more consistently, sometimes scrambled with a little spinach, sometimes a simple 2-egg omelette made the night before and reheated. She also discovered that a small container of cottage cheese, which most people forget about, is actually an excellent source of protein that blends easily with fruit or even just a little cinnamon. These weren't dramatic changes. They were small, sustainable additions that she could realistically maintain without feeling like she was on a strict diet. Let's talk about one more thing that comes up regularly in conversations about breakfast and healthy aging, and that's hydration. As we grow older, the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable. The body's thirst signals weaken with age, which means many older adults begin their day mildly dehydrated without feeling particularly thirsty. Even mild dehydration first thing in the morning can increase fatigue, make it harder to concentrate, raise blood pressure slightly, and contribute to constipation. Drinking a full glass of water first thing after waking up, before coffee and before breakfast, is one of the simplest habits that supports heart health, kidney function, and energy throughout the morning. Coffee itself is a topic worth addressing directly because so many older adults have concerns about it. Current evidence does not suggest that moderate coffee consumption of 2 to 3 cups a day is harmful for most healthy adults, and some research actually associates moderate coffee intake with certain cardiovascular benefits, though the picture is still evolving. What matters more is what goes into the coffee. Sugary creamers, flavored syrups, and large amounts of added sweeteners can turn a relatively neutral cup of coffee into a significant source of added sugar. Plain coffee, coffee with a splash of milk, or coffee with an unsweetened creamer is a very different story than a sweetened coffeehouse drink every morning. Gerald takes his coffee black and considers that non-negotiable. Dorothy uses a small amount of whole milk and no sugar, having gradually reduced the 2 teaspoons of sugar she used to add over about 6 weeks until she no longer missed it. Maggie is still working on this one. She's gotten her flavored coffee syrup down to half a pump from 3 pumps and considers that a genuine victory. Progress, not perfection. Let me pull together what we've covered today in a way that feels useful and actionable, rather than like a long list of rules. The number one breakfast mistake most older adults make is eating a carbohydrate heavy breakfast with little to no protein, little to no healthy fat, and little to no fiber. This pattern, repeated every morning, creates blood sugar swings that strain the pancreas, contribute to vascular inflammation, worsen blood pressure management, and gradually wear away at muscle mass. The solution isn't to stop eating breakfast or to follow a complicated protocol. It's to shift the composition of what's already on the plate. Start by adding a source of protein. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, a small portion of nuts, or even leftover cooked protein from dinner all work well. Swap refined carbohydrates for slower digesting alternatives when possible. Rolled oats instead of instant, whole grain bread instead of white, a whole piece of fruit instead of fruit juice. Add a source of healthy fat if you haven't already. A few walnuts, a quarter of an avocado, a drizzle of olive oil over eggs. Drink a glass of water before your first bite. These aren't dramatic overhauls. They're small, sustainable adjustments that compound meaningfully over months and years. Dorothy is sleeping a little better. Her morning blood sugar readings are more stable, and she told me she has noticeably more energy by mid-morning than she did 6 months ago. Gerald's cholesterol numbers have improved, and his cardiologist is pleased with his trajectory. Maggie is still building her habits, still adjusting, and still occasionally having a tougher morning than she'd like, but she's more consistent than she's ever been, and her diabetes management is improving steadily. None of them did anything extreme. They each made a handful of small, informed adjustments, and then gave those adjustments time to work. That's how real, lasting change happens. Not overnight, and not through dramatic sacrifice, through informed consistency, a little patience, and the understanding that every good choice you make at breakfast sets the tone for the entire day. If you found value in what we covered today, please consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit. A spouse, a sibling, a friend from your community, a parent who's been struggling with energy or blood sugar. Sometimes a conversation about breakfast is the beginning of a much more important health shift. And if you have a question or you want to tell us about one morning habit that's made a real difference in how you feel, please leave it in the comments below. We genuinely read them and we love hearing from you. Please remember this video is for educational purposes only and should not replace professional medical advice. Always consult your physician or another qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your medications, diet, exercise routine, or treatment plan.